And Mr. Andy Clark, we're going to go back to the Fury Chisora free card. A lot of people asking about Daniel Dubois. We sat in here a couple of days ago, a week or so ago, and I think we all kind of expected Dubois to win the fight. I felt like it was going to be a potentially tricky fight early. Wasn't necessarily expecting it to be that tricky early, but a tricky night for Daniel Dubois. And you know, for a split second, for a split second, it looked like, I'm fucking glad he's gone. But anyway, for a split second, it looked like it had all gone horribly wrong for Daniel Dubois.
It did. It really did. And it's such a good example of why you can just never feel like you've seen it all in boxing, because we'll see variations of different things. But that was something, because he definitely did get hit on the top of the head with the left hand, which caused him to give some ground, but then his knee buckled underneath him, and in real time it looked strange to me. I couldn't quite work out what had happened, whether the hit on the top of the head had taken his legs away or what had gone on. But then the next two knockdowns, which weren't even really knockdowns, he just kind of ended up going down.
Yeah.
You could see that there was a problem with the back leg, and lower leg injuries, although rare, really are a problem, because that's where you get your power from. It's not just a balance thing. And the bell went early at the end of that round. I didn't notice that in all of the commotion, but apparently I've heard different things, 8 seconds, 11 seconds, something like that, I think it was. I don't think that honestly really made that much difference, because Lerena wasn't, he wasn't getting on the front foot looking to finish things. He was just kind of waiting for Dubois to collapse, which it looked like he absolutely would. And in the end, it was an impressive win, because it took him a bit of time to work out. I'd imagine it's pretty freaky when something like that happens to you, because you'll need to try and figure out what it actually is that your knee will allow you to do and what it won't allow you to do, because you can't just keep using it in the way that you always do, because it won't do that for you. And that's what he did in the first round. In the second round, probably with some help from Shane, I didn't hear what he said in the corner between rounds, he managed to figure that out. And that's not easy, because it's totally counterintuitive, because he spent his whole life throwing punches with that lightning bolt starting in his right boot, wasn't he, basically? But he kept it really simple, and that's where the technique comes in, isn't it? And the natural power comes in, because when you've got that kind of leg problem, what you can't do is fall in or reach for anything, or you've just got to have very, very simple movements. Those feet have got to stay the same distance apart. It really is back to ground zero basics. And he did that, and he still won, because he's got that right hand. And there was nothing wrong with that stoppage. People were moaning about the stoppage, but it was right above me, and he was gone, Lerena. He was absolutely done. And the corner weren't too impressed with it, but the fighter, he was fine with it, because I don't think he really knew what was happening, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, we'll kind of start at the end of that and work our way back, I suppose. I think on the initial look, I thought, oh, called it now, because I knew it was the end of the round, and you consider all of the issues that Daniel Dubois had in the first round. And then I saw the replay, and I saw the head go in, and I saw Lerena afterwards. He made no complaints about it. So I don't have any problem with the stoppage. I put out a tweet and said, like, what a massive win that was for Dubois. Look, all of the issues that he had in the fight, and there are significant issues when you look at it. I mean, he got caught with a very silly shot. The shot that he got caught with, you should not be getting caught with in the first round of a title fight. Whether you got a WBA regular, world title, European, whatever, you shouldn't be getting caught with a shot like that. Kind of ambled his way into punching range and got hit with a shot, like against a guy who's always going to be at his most dangerous early in the fight. But considering all of the stick that he got after the Joyce fight, where he went down on one knee and had everybody questioning him at the time, he was 23 years old, calling him a quitter, questioning his heart, questioning his desire. There was a moment, more than one moment in that first round, particularly knockdowns 2 and 3, which again weren't knockdowns. He kind of sort of fell, but sort of jumped and kind of threw himself to the floor at times, where I thought this has gone horribly wrong. And I didn't think that he was going to get himself back up. And then you start in those, it's always the way the brain works, particularly when you're watching live sport, the amount of things that go through your head in that one split second. Where's he going to go from here? How does he go back from that? Like, and for him to compose himself, as you said, I wasn't watching the broadcast, I was there. So I didn't hear the instructions from Shane McGuigan, his trainer in the corner. I did speak to Shane afterwards. He said that his instructions were basically find out how hurt you are. Don't throw anything. Just try and get moving. Find out, see what
work out what that knee will and won't do.
Can you throw a shot with it? Can you? And at the time, I guess the commentators to us, or the Twitter idiots curse, whatever you want to call it. I remember tweeting something about Lerena's boxing like somebody who knows, he feels like he knows he's got his man here and he's in trouble. And that second round, he didn't really put it on Dubois. I felt like he felt like he had more time, and he just gave him that round to kind of get around, feel what was going on with the knee.
But I understand why he did
Of course.
Because we were saying the same thing in commentary, me and Spencer. He'd seen him just collapse twice in the first round, because you're right, that first knockdown, that and the initial injury, that was caused by a punch. And he's thinking this is only a matter of time. What I don't want to do is walk onto one, because this lad's a big puncher. And I referenced Hay against Bellew. It's not really the same, but it's similar, because Bellew, from the injury onwards, is thinking, I just need to stay out of the way of these big wild swings, and I'm going to win, because this can't go on forever. And I don't know what Shane would have done necessarily if the fight had just kind of gone on and on and on, because at some point, probably enough is enough. And if the knee collapsed a couple more times, the referee at some point would have stopped it and just said, listen, you can't.
Yeah. I thought he was going to do that.
You can't do this. It was interesting that the referee did count him twice in the second and third knockdowns, because I think there were some punches in there. So I'm not saying he shouldn't have. But I saw a fight between, I can't remember who the opponent was now, but it was Sam Hyde, and he had a big problem with his leg, and he just kept going down. And the referee wasn't counting him, because he was just collapsing. But he did say to him, look, you can't keep collapsing, or I'm going to stop it, because you're clearly unfit to fight. And so he just went to the ropes and stayed there. But yeah, he was a mad 3 rounds. Like I say, you feel like you see most things. And people were talking about the 3 knockdown rule, but you never have a 3 knockdown rule in a UK ring.
Yeah,
that never happens.
Explain that, because there'll be people watching this who are talking about the 3 knockdown rule.
So the WBA and their rules and regulations do have the 3 knockdown rule. If you go in there and have a look at it, you'll find it. Quite why they have it, I don't really know, because these days they hardly ever get to apply it. I did have a fight not that long ago. I can't remember which one it was, but I remember it for this reason, where there was the 3 knockdown rule. And it would have been a WBA sanctioned fight, but it could only have been sanctioned by them. If they're sharing anything with the WBO or IBF, that's then unified rules, and unified rules don't have a 3 knockdown rule. So they would have been sanctioning it, and it would have been under a commission in America that allowed it, whose rules also have the 3 knockdown rule. Now, they're rare. The British Boxing Board of Control does not have a 3 knockdown rule, and the fight was in Britain. And people talk about the WBC, WBA, IBF, WBO as being governing bodies. They're not governing bodies. They're sanctioning bodies. They sanction fights. So their rules and regulations, to an extent, are quite meaningless, because you'll abide by the rules and regulations of
the local commission,
wherever you are. Yeah.
Which, of course, as Andy's just expertly explained, that's why we didn't get Barry Jones to do it. That was the British Boxing Board of Control. So yeah, 3 knockdown rule, not in.
Yeah, but at the start of a fight, like a lot, particularly on fights from America, they're always keen on this. We don't really do it so much in the UK, but they'll kind of bring up some rules, and the ones they always pick out, I mean, there are loads of rules, but the ones they always pick out are no 3 knockdown rule, can't be saved by the bell, only the referee can stop the fight, mandatory 8 count, and they'll usually say something about 4 rounds needing to be completed and that kind of thing. But that's where it's always in amongst that, because you very, very rarely see it in operation.
Yeah, so that was kind of the 3 knockdowns in the first round. Second round, he was able to survive. Third round, got the stoppage. So I think, look, there are some warning signs there. The fact that he was, I mean, the first knockdown was a completely legitimate shot, caught him high on the head. Yeah. He was hurt, and of course injured himself on the way down. So that's a big concern against Kevin Lerena, a guy who boxed at cruiserweight. He couldn't stop Marius Vac, didn't hurt Marius Vac really. So that's a concern. But the positives from it have to be, when all looked lost, Daniel Dubois, who, even going back to the amateurs, that's something that people would always question about him. What happens when the punches start coming back? What happens when you hit somebody and they don't go anywhere? That's got to be a positive. But now I feel like they're in a position where they do have to be careful with the next opponent now, I feel, for Daniel. He has the WBA regular belt, which, look, we've been through this several times. Is it a full title? Is it whatever? But it's a belt that, people will want because it means you're mandatory for the WBA title. So he's not going to have any particularly after watching that fight at the weekend, he's going to have no shortage of suitors for that title who want to box him. Who next for him on the back of that? I mean, we mentioned Derek Chisora. Chisora's going to come. You know what you're going to get from him? Something who's, I guess, easy to prepare for when you compare it to a nippy, tricky cruiserweight moving up southpaw. But who next for him, and how do you think they should kind of move on really from this this display last weekend?
I do think that Chisora is a decent fight for him. They might feel like that's a little bit too much just yet, possibly, because he's got to heal that knee. Shane said afterwards, didn't he, that he felt like it was a knee ligament, which is a reasonable guess. I think that is what it looked like, but it just depends how bad it was, because that can take a while. Not as long as it would do if you were a footballer, because the range of movement you need from it's not quite the same, and the impacts you're taking aren't anything like the same, obviously. But I agree that you need to be kind of still treating Dubois with kind of kid gloves to an extent, because he, for such a huge bloke, he always strikes me like he really is a young man, isn't he?
He really is, yeah.
He's a young man.
He really is.
And that would have been a very valuable experience for him at the weekend, in terms of just something completely unexpected happening, which could easily have totally scrambled him, and he might have just stayed down that third time because it was all just a bit much. That could have happened. I was wondering if he was going to get back up, actually, when he went down the third time, because he was panicking. Because when you go down and it's not from a punch and it's because your knee's gone, that's the kind of situation where you could end up just thinking, you just take a seat. Yeah, I mean, who are you thinking for him next?
We've had some people in here talking about Zhang. I think that's a really dangerous fight. You don't want that. Like for 3 or 4 rounds, Zhang's a dangerous man.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that at all. Aggressive southpaw who comes.
Yeah, I really enjoyed watching him in Saudi.
Yeah, same. And he can be in some really fun fights. I think that's a really dangerous fight.
Yeah.
Really, as much as I really enjoyed watching Zhang against Hrgovic, I think the fact that he lost the fight is really not going to do him any favours.
Kovnatsky? Something like that, maybe?
Yeah,
I'm thinking of someone who's quite predictable.
Yeah.
Or do you not want that? Do you want someone who he's going to learn a bit more from? And potentially Lerena was that. Yeah. Hellenius. Is he retired? I think he
got knocked out by Wilder. Yeah. I don't know whether or not he officially.
I think he might have said at the end that that's him done, but it's easy to say that when you've been chinned by Deontay Wilder. You might fancy it with somebody else.
I know he lost to Kevin Lerena, but I think he still needs rounds. I think he needs time in the ring.
Yeah.
He had the under Shane McGuigan. He's had the blowout wins over Bogdan Dinu.
Yeah.
Chap that he boxed, a New Yorker, Italian American. What's his name? We mentioned him on the other. He boxed on a Jake Paul undercard. Whatever. And then he had the fight against Trevor Bryan. How good was he? I mean, even that went 4 or 5 rounds. And now he's had 2.5 rounds, 2 of them pretty much on one leg or on an injury.
Yeah.
I think they really need to be careful with him because, look, I think he'll learn a lot from that fight. Hopefully, the hope is that he would learn, a bit more about himself. And, when the going gets tough, he's got that in him. And, he would have surely been questioning that on the back of the Joyce fight because everybody else was doing it. He got a real hammering on the back of that Joyce fight for being down on one knee and not getting up. So you would hope that he kind of grows, I guess, psychologically from something like that. But more than that, my thoughts from the weekend are him ambling into that middle distance and getting hit with a shot that you shouldn't be getting hit with in the first round of a title fight. And that's a concern.
He's still quite gung-ho, isn't he?
Yeah.
And he was in the press conference too. He's quite kind of like Route 1 in everything that he does, really.
But that's how he spars and that's how he fights. He's
Yeah.
And if you can't handle it, get you out of there. It's kind of okay, or freak incident and freak accident aside.
He hasn't lost any confidence or belief in his power, has he?
No, but we've only seen one fighter really take it,
and that's not necessarily a good thing.
No, exactly, because it's what happens when that doesn't work.
Yeah.
We've only seen one fighter really take it and come back in, which is Joe Joyce. So yeah, I think it's going to be tricky. It's going to be interesting to see how quickly they move him. In recent times, particularly in the last 2 or 3 weeks, there's been this talk
about a shit or bust fight for F.A. Ajagba with him.
Well, so somebody made a very will remain nameless, but somebody made a very interesting point to me. If he's the WBA regular champion, why not try and fight for the WBA title? Whether he's ready or not, he's in position, goes and gets a big fight. He can punch. He can still knock it. He can knock Alexander Usyk out if he catches him clean.
Anyone would be wary of him.
Yeah, for sure.
Correctly so.
But if he loses that fight, then he kind of gets a little bit... He's still such a baby.
Yeah.
Because rather than taking a fight, let's say a Martin Bakole, right? Good fight. Could be a fight where he gets knocked out in. And then where does he go? You lose to Martin Bakole...
That's a good point. I mean, that actually, there is always... That's quite a compelling argument always for stepping right up into a fight where people don't think you're going to win. So there's no real pressure on you in that regard. And if you can acquit yourself well, then it's an easy defeat to explain to yourself. And your stock can rise. And as you say, he's so young. He can come again. It's a real interesting point of his career that he's at, because Saturday, I'm sure, would have been pretty exasperating for the trainer, because, like you say, in a sense, psychologically, it is definitely useful to know that he was able to win despite losing the first round 10-6, and it's not often you say that, but also he didn't really see him tested in any of the ways that he really wanted to see him tested, did he?
Yeah. And that's kind of where he's at now. Like, okay, great, take the positives that you can from it.
Yeah, I think it's definitely one of those, isn't it?
But a lot of the questions that we still need answers to are still very much there, and some of them are an even bigger question now. So I don't know. We're getting some people here saying Bakole starches him. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, he may well do, which is kind of the point. Like, you fight like a fringe guy, and they can all punch up at that weight, and he's just been dropped by somebody who didn't expect him to come up and be a puncher. Kevin Lerena wasn't really a puncher down at cruiserweight. So rather than the risk of coming unstuck against the guy top 15, top 20, WBA regular, the WBA's next. Let's say Fury and Usyk happens and Fury wins or Usyk wins. Why not? The belts become fragmented. Fight for the WBA, like the vacant WBA against Anthony Joshua, or a rematch with Joe Joyce or somebody like that.
This is what all the guys will be thinking, because, like I said earlier, one of the reasons I want to see Undisputed is so that we can have that fight, find out who is the number one, and then whoever that is can just kind of stand astride Mount Olympus and throw the belts to the wind. And people will get opportunities, and we could see some really, really tasty matchups. So if you're kind of in the wings waiting for your opportunity, it's coming. Yeah, it's definitely coming, and I think it will come before the end of next year, probably.
Christian Hammer for Dubois, yeah. That's probably around the level that I think, and that's no disrespect to Daniel Dubois. Hammer's he's been game and he's been the distance with some good fighters.
Takam, guys like that, guys who were top 10 not that long ago, or top 15 not that long ago, but aren't anymore. But you could probably still try and make a case that they are. It's. I think that's probably where we're looking.
Takam's still very tough. He go the distance with Arslanbek Makhmudov. He got dropped early
halfway
in the fight,
with Joyce, didn't he?
Yeah. So yeah, I think a few questions, of more than a few questions, I think still there for Daniel Dubois, but time very much on his side. We've got another question here about a certain Jermaine Franklin, who of course was went the distance with Dillian Whyte in a fight where a lot of people certainly had it very, very close, if not had him.
They did a lot of sparring, didn't they?
Yeah, so they sparred. They did 10 rounds 3 times. Which not everybody does with Daniel Dubois, because he is, he's very heavy-handed and he spars like he fights. He can straight through you, and if you can't handle it, then you're going to be out of there. So, I mean, is that too dangerous? Is that too, something that... Does he need somebody who's going to go in there and hit, and they're going to go and get a bit of confidence, or does he need somebody who's going to take him rounds? I think he's in a very, very interesting
I think he
part of his
probably.
career
I
now.
think he needs someone who's going to take him round, because I said earlier that he hasn't lost any confidence in that power, and that's a bit of a double-edged sword, because you don't want to, like as you said, you put it perfectly. Like, what happens when that doesn't work? You don't want to. I remember talking to Russ Amber about this, because he had David Lemieux, who just ironed everybody out early in his career and for really quite a long time, and Russ said he was always telling him, we need a plan B here, because this won't always work. And David Lemieux just didn't believe him, basically. And Russ described it as puncher's disease.
Yeah.
And it's a thing, and it's dangerous. So if you could put him in with someone who you suspect can take it, I'd be tempted to do that.